Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, July 10th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the Virginia governor election in which President Trump is now putting forth his efforts for Glenn Youngkin as the Republican nominee, sort of complicating things as CNN reports. And I agree with that statement very much that the complications for Youngkin is that he is trying to appeal to the middle of America, the middle of Virginia voters, centrists, independents, people that were done with President Trump that didn't exactly find him to be either of those two things, neither an independent nor a centrist. And then looking at, Youngkin's alternative, in addition to appealing to those voters, he also needs to appeal to the Trump wing. He needs to be able to win over those voters by the same amount that Donald Trump did and then expand from there. Because Donald Trump is the baseline. In the 2020 presidential election, Donald Trump won just 44% of the vote. And if you know and understand why I'm saying just 44% of the vote, realize that this was the largest margin of victory for a Democrat in the state of Virginia since 1944. So for Virginia to go to Joe Biden by 10.1%, that was certainly a response to Donald Trump being the president of the United States in 2016 throughout 2020. So what I expect for Youngkin is that, or what I did expect for the longest time, was that he was not going to campaign with Trump. He was not going to wholeheartedly accept certain endorsements. I mean, when Glenn Youngkin won the nomination, Donald Trump immediately sent out a statement. But other than that, we hadn't heard much from him on this exact race. But recently, just 2 days ago, President Trump sent out a statement where he was saying, wow, the numbers are looking really good for Glenn Youngkin in his race against Terry McAuliffe for governor of Virginia. Glenn has been an incredible success and will truly make Virginia great again. An emphasis on that, saying, rarely have I seen such enthusiasm. So what's happening here in the state of Virginia is that President Trump is trying to, number one, paint Terry McAuliffe in a similar fashion as Hillary Clinton and saying that he's a political hack. And that Glenn Youngkin will make Virginia great again. And you can start to see why this is worrisome for Glenn Youngkin. He ran in the 2021 primary on the assumption that under the, expectation that he would not be as much of a Trump wing Republican as some might expect. I mean, when you take a look at the endorsements that he received, the endorsements that he was able to get versus other candidates in the race, I mean, you might notice that there are instances in which, Michael Flynn endorsed Amanda Chase. He's a recognizable name within the GOP. He's a recognizable name on behalf of Donald Trump. You have Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who endorsed Pete Snyder. Some of these endorsements that were made by Trump administration officials, were made by people close to President Trump. The only real one that I would say Glenn Youngkin got that was sort of surprising and also a little bit close to President Trump was Ted Cruz and Kevin Stitt. But for the rest of that, what we saw happen in this race was that the Virginia Republican Party ensured that the nomination efforts would go to a candidate besides Amanda Chase. And who is Amanda Chase? Well, she used the exact strategy of that campaign slogan, Make Virginia Great Again. And it's one that the Republican Party campaign seems to have sort of pushed away for the longest time until Donald Trump threw it right back on them. In the polls, based off of the primary, assuming that we were reaching a primary instead of a convention vote, keep in mind the convention vote was a last-minute decision made by the Republican Party across the state to hold a convention nominating type process with ranked choice voting rather than a regular primary. And the reason why that's important is because the numbers were dramatically different. In the primary polls, Amanda Chase won every single poll, 29% to, the rest, 22, 17, 24. She won in every single poll. But the convention poll, the only one released from the Trafalgar Group, which is a right-wing pollster, showed that Glenn Youngkin was ahead by 28 points over Amanda Chase, the person who had led in every single primary poll. Kurt Cox was at 10%, Amanda Chase at 10%, and Pete Snyder at 26%. So Youngkin was at 38%, absolutely decimating everybody else, and that seemed to be the final result. Glenn Youngkin received in the first round 32% of the vote, Amanda Chase just 21%. By the time the rounds had advanced on, Amanda Chase was then eliminated. And the final results were 55% for Glenn Youngkin to 45% for Pete Snyder. So Glenn Youngkin, in many cases, was handpicked by the Republican Party. as they changed the nominating effort because they knew it would disenfranchise the voters and the plurality style of victory that Amanda Chase could have gotten had there been a traditional primary. So with Youngkin's winning of the nomination, this sort of meant for Democrats that this race was truly going to be competitive. I mean, looking at the history of Virginia, these nominees typically don't win without the heavy support of an incumbent Republican or heavy support of, former Republicans or notable Republicans across the state. Youngkin won because of this convention process without many notable Republicans actually endorsing him statewide. I mean, Youngkin received just 4 endorsements. It's all interesting just to see how Ed Gillespie was able to win in his Republican primary in 2017. It was a very competitive race, but Corey Stewart was actually arguably the more Trump-wing Republican. Ed Gillespie barely beat him in this primary. In the Virginia primary in 2016, Donald Trump received just 35% of the vote. Marco Rubio received 32%, Ted Cruz received 17%, and the rest received single digits. But Donald Trump only received 17 delegates to Marco Rubio's 16, so it wasn't significantly different from what we saw. And Terry McAuliffe in this race did not face a competitive primary. If you're looking at what happened here, it wasn't as competitive as it was in 2017. And even then, Ralph Northam won by double digits. In this primary, Terry McAuliffe, who served as the governor of Virginia before, that's something to also point out, he won with 62% of the vote statewide. Jennifer Carroll Foy received 20%. Jennifer McClellan received 12%. Fairfax received 4%. Keep in mind, he's the incumbent lieutenant governor. And then Lee Carter received 3 points statewide. So what happened for McAuliffe was a very easy pathway to victory. Won every single county. Not a single one went to any of the other candidates. But with Glenn Youngkin's race, it originally started out as more competitive. But with Youngkin pushing away President Trump for at least a pretty considerable time, while he did accept the endorsement before because he sort of had to, there were no campaign stops with Donald Trump on the same, trajectory as Glenn Youngkin. When you go on Donald Trump's campaign website, and yes, it's still up, and yes, he has events where he's speaking to voters, you will notice that all of these events are either being held in Florida, they're being held in Ohio, they're being held in Georgia, but the notable absence is the state of Virginia. And the reason for that, I think, is largely due to the fact that Youngkin has been pushing him away. Yet President Trump sends out this statement, which makes Republicans and the Trump wing maybe more inspired, but certainly will be used against Youngkin and already has. We've already seen political ads from Terry McAuliffe. If you're in the state of Virginia, I'm sure you might have seen one, where they are using Donald Trump as a way to attack Glenn Youngkin. A new video ad released from Terry McAuliffe just constantly replays the statement from Glenn Youngkin where he wholeheartedly accepts this endorsement from Donald Trump, saying that he sort of praising Donald Trump in a few statements. So, what happened for Glenn Youngkin was that he was supposed to disconnect himself from Donald Trump, yet Donald Trump sent out this message and in a sense made it more detrimental and more difficult for Glenn Youngkin in this race to even come close to winning. We could have seen this happening. July 8th, we found this article from ABC News where it says that Nikki Haley was to campaign with GOP gubernatorial nominee Glenn Youngkin. This was Nikki Haley sort of, not only is she helping Youngkin, but also testing the waters ahead of 2024. She doesn't campaign much when you're leaving after you no longer served under the Trump administration. You're out of there. You might want to exit politics. But for Nikki Haley, in her case, she actually wants to focus on politics, largely because I believe truly that she will run for president in 2024. But that's not the only thing we can take away from this. Besides her political aspirations, there also is a point of interest with this campaign between Haley and Youngkin. I mean, Nikki Haley is pretty much, while in many cases viewed as a pro-Trump type of Republican, has also criticized him in the past. So to campaign with her, while not necessarily someone who may be a very recognizable name in the state of Virginia, per se. I mean, she served as the governor of the state of South Carolina. But, looking at Nikki Haley, she offers the close enough comfort for Trump supporters that they know that they have someone who Youngkin is working with on behalf of the former Trump administration. In addition, it isn't Trump enough that the left wing could use this as an attack ad. And while I'm sure they would try, it wouldn't work nearly as well as if it was just Glenn Youngkin receiving that endorsement from President Trump and praising him and being happy about such an endorsement. Because for Nikki Haley to be involved in this race, you can brush it off as just her trying to become president one day. For Donald Trump, I'm sure the same type of, he could be running for president one day can apply. But the point is that Youngkin was meant to be in this race to win it by not being a Trump Republican. His point of running and winning that nomination, the reason why the Republican Party put forth this convention effort is because they knew Amanda Chase, the Make Virginia Great Again candidate, would be the one who could ultimately harm the Republican Party's chances of victory in the state of Virginia. And they weren't necessarily wrong. But now that Youngkin is slowly starting to become this Trump-like candidate, it makes it more difficult for him to win. When you take a look at some of these endorsements, barely any of them are notable ones that are closely tied to Donald Trump. Of course, there are exceptions, but Donald Trump is that one name that you absolutely, can't disconnect from the Capitol insurrection, can't disconnect from the pandemic, can't disconnect from the countless tweets. I mean, what was used against Trump would not necessarily have been as employable against Youngkin had Donald Trump not sent out an additional statement where he attacks Terry McAuliffe, where he praises Glenn Youngkin, saying Glenn Youngkin will make Virginia great again. Those 4 words alone could be this point in the race where Glenn Youngkin is on the pathway to losing. Now, I didn't think Youngkin was going to win this race to begin with, but I did think he would make it more competitive. In 2017, the state of Virginia went to Ralph Northam by 8 to 9 points, a margin of actually 8.9%. So if you round up, a 9-point margin for the Democrat over the Republican. And it is fascinating to see. But the last time Terry McAuliffe was elected was 2013, and this was an incumbent Democrat off year. So it wasn't a midterm. There wasn't as much energy on the Republican side. But Terry McAuliffe proved to voters then that he could win a race in 2013 despite Obama being unpopular, despite it being a year not too favorable for Democrats. What happened in Virginia was that Terry McAuliffe kept that state, or actually flipped that state from red to blue, because in 2009, the year after Obama was elected, the state of Virginia went to Bob McDonnell by nearly 20 points over his Democratic opponent. So in 2013, Terry McAuliffe actually flipped the state from red to blue. And then 2017, it was remaining blue in Ralph Northam's column. But Ed Gillespie was also one closely tied to President Trump in this race. I mean, what happened was Donald Trump endorsed him, Mike Pence endorsed him, George W. Bush endorsed him. I mean, look at all of these endorsements from representatives, from senators, from cabinet officials, Steve Bannon, right? Nikki Haley. These are people that are tied closely to President Trump, for some of them not too much, but the point is there were many more endorsements for Ed Gillespie in the United States, in the governor election, in the general election, versus 2021, where you fast forward and you don't see nearly as many top Republican names closely tied to President Trump. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason why this list here comprises of very few people that are tied closely to the Trump administration. I mean, you have Nikki Haley and Donald Trump himself, and then maybe you could say Ted Cruz. But other than that, it's just the standard failed primary candidates endorsing him, and then regular state delegates, a representative, a governor. So the point being that many people seem to have held off in their major endorsements in this race. And potentially the campaigns don't seem to be completely underway. But there's also something else I would like to point out about the nominations and about the endorsements that are made. In 2017, this race was supposed to be the first true test of the state of Virginia and the Trump administration. It was a position in which the Democratic Party was needing to win this governor's race by a large margin. Otherwise, there wouldn't exactly be that expected anti-Trump wave a year later. Now, no one's expecting an anti-Trump wave in 2022. But the thing is, typically speaking, you endorse candidates who you believe have a real shot at victory. No one ever likes to endorse the losing candidates, and it looks negatively on your endorsements. For President Trump, he is in a position where many of his endorsements have solely been people who are in positions where they're running practically unopposed, where they're in such safe districts that, yes, it looks like Trump's endorsement was a part of their victory, but at the end of the day, they were going to win regardless. And sometimes politicians tend to hold off if there is a position where they could endorse someone, but they don't think they're going to win, so then they decide against it. Now, I think Youngkin had a better chance now, or has a better chance, than Gillespie did back in 2017. I think the margin will be narrower than what we saw in 2017. But for right now, not many notable Republicans are endorsing Glenn Youngkin, and there's a reason for that. It could be a combination of him pushing away Donald Trump, but it doesn't seem that Donald Trump wants to go away. I mean, what he sees in Virginia potentially is a pickup opportunity for Republicans, and he wants to be involved in every way that he can. Because if he is, there will be more credibility behind his name leading into the midterm elections. But if he loses, if Youngkin loses this race, it could prove to be detrimental for Donald Trump. So I think there's a reason why he's not necessarily endorsing him, not necessarily campaigning with him, but endorsing him. But the fact is, Donald Trump seems to be reiterating the support of Glenn Youngkin, which will only end up hurting him. The state of Virginia is not too kind to Donald Trump. They don't seem to like him and didn't seem to like him in 2020, 2016, or traditionally, just the regular Republican Party in 2012 or 2008. This is the first time we've seen such a large margin for a Democrat in the state of Virginia, and for Donald Trump to try to interject himself again in this governor's race is quite alarming for the GOP, and more alarming for Glenn Youngkin. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.